Thank you, Urska, and thank you all to be here. My task probably is going to be as hard as the last time. Last time you were almost in hypoglycemia to go to eat, and this time now you are all full up. So I hope you don't fall into the siesta in the bed. I will try to keep you awake, and I would like to, if you allow me, to steal 5 minutes to say something about Mondragon, but always within the framework of the youth issue. You see, I also prepared a poor point, and it's poor because also, I mean, the nice thing is that being here and listening to people, to you in particular, but also the last presentation, there are lots of ideas that come and things that you have to say that you had not foreseen in the beginning. So regarding the Mondragon, I just wanted to say a few things which, from the outside, from the worldwide cooperative movement, I have observed that they are considered to be very important things for the cooperative movement. And numerically, the Mondragon level of employment and even all its figures are small if you compare it to the whole cooperative movement worldwide. Yeah? So why does the cooperative movement find it interesting? And why also is it, as you will see, important for young people? First of all, it's something that works. It may sound, let's say, very ordinary, but this is something which is not an elaboration of ideas. It is something that has concretely worked. And it's an economic reality in which every month you have new people, young people being employed. And so if you want to deal with youth unemployment, one of the first things, of course, is to create enterprises that function and that develop and can employ young people. There also being cooperatives that are a big source of employment because they are in sectors that require employment. Another thing is that it started from the situation in that place. So that means that to get inspired from that experience also means that one should try to decipher, try to see in each one's environment what are the advantageous things that you can take. What is the heritage that you have? In their case, they had industrial activities for centuries. They had a school that was there already. And so they sort of tried to work on what was there already. Another thing that I have to say, and that's very important, Arismendieta, the priest that Ander talked about, is really one of the greatest thinkers in history of the cooperative movement. You have maybe at most 6 or 7 great thinkers, and he's one of them. Yeah, like you could say Gandhi is another one, for example, and the ones that I mentioned yesterday, who invented, for example, production cooperatives in France and credit cooperatives in Germany. So he's one of the great ones, and it is very important because this is something that should also be developed in the cooperative movement. Let's say, in order to create the enthusiasm, or let's say the call from the heart, as Ander mentioned, you need to, the youth need to believe, to be attracted to something in which they can believe, which they can really inspire them. And the founder of Mondragon wrote many things, so there are many things which are inspiring, which can be mobilizing for young people. And so also I think that one of the things that we can learn from them is how can we, let's say, better take advantage of all this thinking of the great cooperative thinkers, and that one in particular, who has been particularly important. Another idea is that the cooperative principles in Mondragon have been applied to the letter. People may think, look, I mean, this is very original, they have gone to many countries. In fact, they have been extremely orthodox regarding the cooperative principles, but also they have inspired the cooperative principles. So they have, in fact, in 1995, the last update of the cooperative principles, Mondragon was already well known, and the thinking of Arisman Darieta and the practice of Mondragon and the principles that had already been worded in Mondragon have inspired the present version of the cooperative principles, the new identity statement. Now, another thing is that the cooperative logic, which you have at in every cooperative, has been applied to higher levels in a very strong way. We have other cooperative groups in the world, but the fact of having, let's say, made a group so tightly knit, you have seen how much money goes from the gross results to consortia that are intermediate, let's say, structures between the grassroots cooperative and the head unit. So much money goes there every year, you know, and so many assets are being built in common. So this is also something that is important to think about when thinking about the future of the cooperative movement in a country. The issue of the fact that there are strong democratic procedures. You could think this is a business group, it's, you know, they do business, and so, but they're also very democratic. Everything is discussed in congresses. It takes time, and but it means that it's not only in an individual cooperative, but even at a higher level, in a big group of cooperatives like that, they can take time to deliberate and elaborate things together, dividing very clearly what is the general strategy from what is day-to-day management, yeah, and but everybody's involved in it. Everybody's involved in the long-term strategy, but at the same time, it's a group. It's a business group. It's also not representative organizations, to such an extent that Mondragon helped create the Confecop, which is the Confederation of Basque Cooperatives. So the two organizations are quite distinct from each other. Yeah? An important issue for the youth also, to develop cooperatives with young people, is that Mondragon has cooperativized work, including in cooperatives that are not, properly speaking, and only worker cooperatives. So of course in the worker cooperatives it's logical that the workers are members. But in the non-worker cooperatives, you have agricultural cooperatives, you have cooperatives like the university, or consumer cooperatives, where the workers have a certain proportion of power, and the consumers, for example, in the consumer cooperative, another proportion of power. This is important also because it's not only having the workers as members, but also because Mondragon basically invented what has become extremely fashionable now, an important big subject of discussion. It is multi-stakeholder cooperatives. So cooperatives in which you don't have only the workers or only the farmers, but you have different types of members, but not only just like that, one person, one vote, just as simple as that. There is also a proportion in the General Assembly between the various stakeholders. So for example, in Eroski, in the consumer cooperative, 50% to the consumer, 50% to the workers. Yeah? And so that means that the interests of each party is properly represented. That's also something that could be appealing to young people. And the idea of developing, let's say, cooperatives in which the various actors that are involved in the cooperative can have a say, can have a vote, can have a part of the power, but at the same time, one which is proportionate to the real importance of that group of people. Okay, so basically this is what I wanted to say about yes. In the end, Mondragon also is an interesting thing, is that it's once I had a Chinese group going to Mondragon, I organized a Chinese group going to Mondragon, and from an organization I have the honor to be a member, which is a member of the ICA, the International Committee for the Promotion of Chinese Industrial Cooperatives, or Gonghe in Chinese. The president, the chairman of that organization, was an ex-minister of industry of China, and he went to Mondragon for a week and he studied the system there. And he came back, and very interesting for an ex-minister in a country like China, to tell me, this is a political model. So for him, this was a political model, in the sense that this was a model that he could use, that could have a leverage on policies, something that, because precisely it existed, something that you cannot say it does not exist, it exists, so something you can show to the authorities of China or another country, to say this exists, and so corporates have to be taken seriously, because look at that, these things do exist. And of course, a big challenge for the future, but I will not go into that. What Anders said, we are not perfect. We also have, the enterprise we have abroad are not cooperatives. At the same time, this is an enormous challenge. Mondragon certainly did the right thing going abroad. This is not an easy situation, and this is something we are not prepared to in the cooperative movement. What would be the future when we have, let's say, internationalized activities? What is the future of the cooperative movement when it becomes a movement that really goes across the borders? There are no simple answers to that. And this is also something which is interesting for the youth to think about little by little. Okay, now, just a few examples, just so you saw the movie yesterday. Those examples were mainly among worker and social cooperatives, because it's a Sicopa movie. And so I just wanted to add a few examples here, just to revive our memory, to show that young people have established cooperative in a number of activities, like here, organic vegetarian shop in Denmark. Next door in Croatia, this cooperative, a fully female cooperative brewery, created through crowdfunding, and they have a beer which is called the Disobedient Beer. And you see two of their members here, and they won a prize. Cooperative Europe made a prize for let's say, cooperatives this year, and they won the prize for, I mean, the best cooperative in Europe for this year. And then also in Croatia, this guy started establishing a bank. He was a consultant in the financial industry in Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and he went back to Croatia to work on this project of creating a cooperative bank in Croatia. You have this cooperative for Mujeres con Energía, women with energy in cooperative, and it's interesting because also something to think about. When the more you promote gender equality, the more you also you can also indirectly promote youth cooperatives, in the sense that the fact that you focus on different types of members, let's say women, youth, and so on. So when you differentiate between the genders, but also between the ages, it helps, let's say, put the focus on the different components in the cooperative and make sure that everybody is properly represented. When we talk about the youth and cooperatives, we first have to work on the concept. There's a lot of talk I heard repeatedly over and over again that cooperatives are old, but often this idea that the cooperatives are old is something that is said not so much by young people. So there is a generation which is a little bit younger than mine and a bit older than the youth today. So in intermediate generation, not only in this country, but also across the world, there has been a period in which people have been more ashamed of cooperatives, in which probably the values of competition have prevailed over those of cooperation. And but it's like we are going full circle now, and that the youth of today do not necessarily have the same opinion, the same perception about cooperatives and the value they carry than this intermediate generation. So that generation makes more noises probably about the issue of youth and cooperatives than the youth themselves. That's what I want to say. So we have to listen, first of all, to what the youth are saying, and also trying to mobilize them, as I said, about the concept of the cooperative and the concept of cooperation in general. but also in practical terms, not only in terms of big ideas, but also giving them very concrete examples and ideas. In fact, this video that you saw, because I was in Sicopa before, so I took part in the editing of this video also, and we, in the framework of that campaign, which Diana explained, and an interesting thing is that we thought, what would be the best communication way to, what is the message the youth want to hear? How could we, let's say, make them sensitive to the cooperative ideas? And we thought that it was important to show testimonies. In fact, this is, the 9 little stories you had in these videos show individual stories of individual cooperatives. And so the youth that watch this video can relate directly to that experience. So people who testify, who say, this is what happened to me, this is my experience. This is also something important. And the fact that democracy and the democratic enterprises can be attractive to young people, to work on the issue of democracy. And democracy at work, democracy on the workplace, is something that should be properly elaborated, probably more than has been done so far in the cooperative movement, and should be probably developed. So we should have also instruments in communication instruments, teaching instruments that really work on the issue of democracy in the enterprises. Entrepreneurial promotion. So it's important also, that's from the federations or from the hubs, from the organizations promoting cooperatives. It's important also to attract young people through sectors in which they can be interested, they can be attracted to, like IT, environmental services, organic food production, for example, culture and heritage, and there are other sectors which are probably more mobilizing than others. But also, probably to have a new look also at agriculture. So also try not to show that agriculture cooperatives are something of the past, it's the old type, the conventional types of cooperatives. No, there are also very modern and new and young agricultural cooperatives as well. Communication. So I mentioned the film and the campaign that Diana explained earlier. And so with that, it was important to focus on the type of communication. And as I said, we have to show the concrete testimonies that I said already. Now, the issue of young people is not only an issue of the young people. It's an enormous problem for the survival of the cooperative movement, including for the cooperatives of the youth that are being created today. Because the youth, imagine a cooperative of 3 or 4 youth, or more or less youth, they are between 30 and 35. Between 10 years, they will no longer be youth. Are they going to be able to renew their cooperative? It's easy when you have the same age. They all have more or less the same age, and they start as comrades, and they start their enterprise. Then it starts growing. Will they be able to work on this generational renewal? Is it something that they will think about? Is it something that they will be aware about? It's not because a cooperative is established by young people that necessarily they value or they understand what is at stake with generational renewal. And we have to make sure that when they suddenly realize that they have to think about it, it's not too late. Because what we have seen also in a number of cooperatives is that people start thinking about that when they are about 55, and then it's a bit late. They have to think of it before. And otherwise, many cooperatives can close down simply because the people who established that cooperative were all of a certain age, and then they reached retirement age, and that's it. And except if, of course, the cooperative has developed sufficiently in order to attract young people. But it's not only, let's say, about having young employees or young members, but how are you going to to involve those young people in the governance of the enterprise. Officially, and in the rules of most cooperatives, you heard the ones of Mondragon, but you have many cooperatives around the world where, in principle, the youth have exactly the same power as the older people. Yeah, and there is no, just like you have the same for gender. I mean, there is no difference between a female member and a male member, but there are lots of unwritten rules very often, and that nobody will probably, let's say, admit. But I remember someone who came to see me in Brussels one day because he wanted to see if there was a job opportunity in an organization in Brussels, if we could collaborate or whatever. The guy, I would say, was a kind of cooperative refugee. He's a young guy. And he came to Brussels. He came from a social cooperative in Italy. And he concluded that he was no longer able, he was not able to be properly represented in that cooperative. That cooperative had a kind of clan of old people that controlled the cooperative. And there were some other young people, but there was some kind of unwritten rule or a vicious circle that, according to him at least, made it impossible for him to continue that cooperative. He preferred to go abroad. And in fact, afterwards, he helped establish another cooperative in Brussels. So he really wanted to work on the cooperative idea. So this is it. You have to make sure that the young people have their share of power. But this, how does it work? You have to work on, you have to make it explicit. The more you hide things, the more you don't explicit things, the more unwritten rule can start existing, and then they consolidate, and then it becomes harder and harder to get rid of them. So the best way is to put things on the table, to say that there is a problem about gender, about the youth, to recognize it. And again, when we said this morning that in Slovenia people don't like don't like conflicts. Nobody likes conflicts anywhere in the world, and there are many cultures where you avoid conflicts. I mean, I lived many years in China, and I can assure you that it's not easy also in the Chinese culture to, let's say, to explicit conflicts. So it's not easy. It's better to prevent them. It's better to, especially to show that it's normal that we have differences of opinion, and that will also appeal to young people, by the way. Say, well, democracy is also about having differences of opinion, differences of view, even important ones, but they have to be dealt with pacifically and democratically. So, and including that one, how are we going to make sure that on the board of our cooperative there will be a sufficient proportion of youth that would more or less reflect the proportion of youth in the cooperative in general, so that the youth will express themselves. I could see that myself on the board of the ICA now. There is a youth representative. Yeah, so I'm talking about the board of the ICA itself now, and I've seen for myself that the fact of having one among 26 members of the board of the ICA who is a youth delegate is important. It brings another voice. So this is the person who is supposed to represent the youth. This is also things that could be, let's say, in some cooperatives do exist. So you have, let's say, a representative of certain categories of people. This is also something that can be done if necessary. In any case, to have numerically a sufficient number of youth, or to make sure that the youth voice is being, let's say, represented. But that's also not enough. You have to make sure that the youth who is on the board is not going to be intimidated. So all that has to be explicited, and all that can be done only through education and training. So this, it's not something that you just do like that. You remember yesterday I put the 5th cooperative principle, education and training, just after the 2nd one, the democratic principle, because there is no democracy without education. The real democracy takes place with education. So in the issue of how the youth are going to express themselves democratically, it's the same thing. You need to have also you need to have the proper training and education. Also because, remember, in the cooperatives, we don't only talk about participation. it's not only participation, it's control. So if we want to make sure that let's say, members of the cooperative, we control, we have to make sure that all the various components of our membership can co-control the enterprise. And that's much more difficult to do than appears at first sight. So this is why all the various, let's say, categories or types of persons, like the youth, old, men, women, and so on, this should be explicited. It should be, it's not something that should be taboo. Until now, do you think that, I mean, does it ring a bell to you? Do you think that these are things that could be reflected about in terms of ideas to elaborate in the next session? Because I understand that you're going to have a session on, for proposals and recommendations. Okay. Another important issue, but there we are moving more towards regulatory, let's say, aspects. Indivisible reserves, which we already talked about, and which are, by the way, one of the pillars of the Mondragon system is that it's based on indivisible reserves, like all cooperatives in Spain. The fact of having indivisible reserves, especially, I would say, in small cooperatives and cooperative SMEs, and in particular worker cooperatives or social cooperatives, probably less so in production cooperative, but more in production cooperative than in consumer cooperatives, probably, or the cooperative banks. Because in cooperative SMEs, you have very few people working in the cooperative, and especially if it's a new enterprise, a young enterprise, pressure about closing it are very strong. More than if it's an old cooperative, rooted already for 100 years in the countryside, and so it will be more difficult to imagine that you close it. Instead, a typical small worker cooperative or a small social cooperative can easily, let's say, be pushed to close down. The youth who created that cooperative could easily think, well, that's enough. I mean, why do we struggle? It's not working. Let's close down. You could imagine that this bicycle shop we saw yesterday, well, there are 3 people. They have a crisis next year. Okay, let's stop. We managed to accumulate a bit of money, but why don't we close it down? We share the benefits, and then everybody goes on. We share the reserves, the assets, and everybody tries to build a new business on his own or her own. If you have the reserves you have established reserves, you have assets that in any case you're not going to get back, then of course you think twice about closing the cooperative. It's much more difficult to take the decision, okay, let's close down, and it doesn't matter, all that money will go to wherever, to another cooperative, to a federation, let's say to an organization that promotes cooperatives, whatever. So it is something that will, we have seen it, let's say, be conducive to the development of cooperative SMEs, and therefore of, let's say, of youth entrepreneurship in cooperatives, because many SMEs, of course, that are being established among young people. Then you are, especially in the agricultural field, but not only, you have cooperatives that have been helping young people establish themselves in their production unit. So, for example, in a farm. Especially in areas where the agricultural cooperative is losing members, and therefore, let's say, some fields are being sold, and so the cooperative risks closing down after a while if the old farmers are retiring. And if they don't have children, if the children don't want to take over, let's say, to continue the activity, what do you do? So some cooperatives have developed, let's say, policies to help attract young people from the cities, establish themselves in that area, and they will give them some, let's say, some help, including in the land tenure, how to help them, let's say, in giving them loans, or helping them, let's say, through a renting system for some time, so that they can manage to settle down little by little as new farmers. And then the tutoring. So you have also cooperatives in which all the members, all the farmers, for example, will help younger ones. Like here, for example, this wine cooperative in the middle of nowhere, middle of France, really a small village in the center of France, where you can see here you have this man who is older than the other one. Well, this older man, he's the tutor of the other one. So the young one, he's a guy who comes from the city. He's not a farmer at all. He's a technician. He's an engineer. He was an engineer, but he wanted to quit his job. He wanted to go back to the countryside and become a farmer, let's say a grape grower. And so this is it here. You see the older man is helping him and giving him the knowledge transfer. And this guy has established, and they are both now members of the same cooperative.
Vprašanje glede relevantnosti tega, kar vi govorite, je abstraktno, zato ker so organizatorji konference povedali o tem že svoje mnenje in uvrstili vaše predavanje v konferenco na nespregledljiva mesta. Meni osebno seveda se mi zdi relevantno to, kar vi govorite, če sam govorim v svojem imenu. Da, zdi se mi relevantno. Tisto, kar bi pa hotel povedati, da me je najbolj spodbudilo k razmišljanju v zadnjih 15 minutah, je bilo tisto, kar ste rekli, da nihče nima rad sporov in da v vseh kulturnih območjih in vseh časih, da se pravzaprav izogibajo sporenju. Na eni strani ste uvedli definicijo spora, na drugi strani uporabljate izraz reševanje na demokratičen način, se pravi razgovorno reševanje problemov. To sta dve, eno je spor in eno je razgovorno reševanje problemov. Tu jaz imam en tak splošen občutek, bi vam hotel ga povedati, da vsa konferenca in tudi vaša pripoved oziroma vaša razmišljanja so tako na distanci do sporov. Jaz pa kot kulturni delavec, ki imam zadrugo kulturno, v bistvu pa gledam na vzpostavljanje sporov, vzpostavljanje spornih točk, na uveljavljanje v javnosti sporenja. Gledam kot na priložnost oziroma na moč. To je bila moja, bom rekel, spor, nesprejemanje in nasprotovanje, spodbujanje tega, promocija tega, to se mi zdi, da je eno zdravilo, ena prihodnost. Pika, nimam več kaj dodati. To je bila pač moj konstruktivni prispevek, upam, da konstruktivni, pa vas bom vprašal, a se vam je zdel konstruktiven?
Thank you very much. And of course, I mean, the words are very are traps sometimes. And probably, I mean, the words have different connotations, including the word in Slovene for conflict. Even the same word conflict may have different connotations in different, even in English can have different connotations according to different people and so on. It's very difficult. What I want to say mainly is that, first of all, the differences of opinion is about anything, is something that should never be taboo in a democratic enterprise. So any opinion should be able to be expressed, and but not only about external things, but also about ourselves, and that becomes more difficult. This is often where where it becomes conflictual. It's when, let's say, the differences of opinion start having to do with specific people, and so because then it becomes more, I would say, irrational, more passionate, and then we feel that the people who think they are, let's say, being the object of this discussion feel attacked or feel vulnerable. And so first of all, we have to create, let's say, in the enterprise, an atmosphere in which we will also make people understand that when we have differences of opinion, including about the various components, for example, women, youth, and so on, we are not attacking anybody. So it's not, because often the people, the problem starts becoming difficult because people feel attacked, and then the other ones, and then they counterattack, and then the other part people feel counterattacked as well, and so on, and then it becomes an escalation. It becomes more and more difficult, whereas in the first place there was nothing grave about it, and so I think that it should also not be taboo that we could reach a conflict, so we could reach a situation in which we would be really with two or more groups of people who have reached a level of tension. So we should also not see it as taboo. It could happen, and if it happens, we will have to solve it. But in as much as possible, just like diseases, it's better to prevent them than to cure them. So, of course, it is much better if we can, let's say, think about ways we can avoid conflicts in the first place, and in particular about different types of human beings.
Meni kar se mi zdi zelo pomembno, pa kar se ves čas izpostavlja, pa kar je bilo izpostavljeno tudi sedaj, je ta nota izobraževanja, ne, tudi za mlade ljudi, zaradi tega, ker se mi zdi, da danes zaradi pač celotnega politično-ekonomskega sistema, v katerem živimo in tako dalje, se tudi reformira sistem izobraževanja in se vodi k temu, da se čim hitreje dobi neke kompetence ali pa neke nazive, certifikate, zelo malo pa je nekega posluha pa potrpljenja za dejansko pridobivanje znanja, kar opažamo tudi tisti, ki delamo v organizacijah, ki se ukvarjamo tudi z mladimi. Se pravi, je zelo težko neko pozornost držati, če organiziraš neko predavanje ali pa delavnico za dalj časa, oziroma se zdi, da ne samo mladi, tudi starejše generacije tega znanja ne cenijo več in želijo čim hitreje pridobiti nekaj, kar jih bo hitro na drugo točko preneslo. Ampak se mi zdi, da ravno pa v zadružništvu je to izobraževanje pa razumevanje koncepta zadruge tako pomembno. Na kak način, naprimer tukaj, se dela z mladimi, oziroma, mislim, en primer je bil to, kar smo mi delali, ampak ker smo delali samo 2 leti z različnimi skupinami, ne moremo reči, da je to res najboljši model, ampak kako res mlade pritegniti, da dobijo ta posluh za znanje, da je to znanje potrebno zlasti v takšnih okoljih.
I had foreseen to talk about the issue of education at different levels. First of all, the education on cooperatives at all levels of the school curriculum, that this is part of the public policies. And I mean, this is not exactly what you are saying, but first of all, there should be, we should aim at having really, I mean, to do all the lobbying, the possible lobbying, so that at least there would be 1 hour in 12 years of school in which you will hear about cooperatives, only 1 hour. I didn't have that, yeah? And which is incredible. And I heard, and I learned about other types of enterprise, multinationals, you name it, and so on. I mean, all classes about the economy, not 1 hour about cooperatives. So, and the situation in many countries has gone backward. So that in the business schools, let's say there is less, in general, there's less classes on cooperatives than 40 or 50 years ago, very often. So it's, the reality has gone backward. How do you want people to have, let's say, to at least think about creating cooperatives if they don't have it as part of their background, of their educational background? It's much more difficult, and very often, unless they fall upon a course like you are having, or if they have, let's say, their brother-in-law in a cooperative, or the cousin, and so on, and very often it's like that, and people hear about it because of the cousin, and so on. But first of all, it should be within the school curriculum. Also, and I jump here. What is it? Here. Also to provide information on the cooperative option. So you need also, as part of the public policies, you would need to have the information when people go to the unemployment offices. They should have, let's say, this kind of information. And very often, even in countries where the cooperative movement is much stronger than in Slovenia, like in Italy, for example, I heard that it is very difficult, that they will tell you, you could create a cooperative. And no, you can establish, a partnership, you can make an individual business, and so nobody will tell you, or rarely will tell you, that you could also create a cooperative. So, of course, don't blame young people if they don't do it, if nobody tells them. Yeah? And then help young people, of course, establish cooperatives. There are certainly many young people who would be, who are in structures where more like partnerships, so they will establish partnerships, and because they like, to be together and not to have bosses. So you have people who establish some kind of enterprises among 3 or 4 people, and they could have established a cooperative if they had known. So, but they had this kind of spirit, they had this kind of ideal, but they didn't know. Yeah? The other thing is that regarding education, this is something also that comes from Latin America, in particular from Brazil, from Paulo Freire. Yeah, okay, please.
I wanted to say, when Kaya was presenting critical literacy yesterday, because it's based on critical pedagogy by Paulo Freire, so part of this critical literacy, working rights through critical literacy, was based on this Paulo Freire's model. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's say the essence between, let's say, Paulo Freire's logic is that people have to learn, let's say, in a different way. I mean, through the very means of their own production. So they will have to. So you have to teach a peasant to write. You will have to. You do it with the instruments with whom he or she works, for example. And also, you will also obtain another type of reaction from the student, from the trainee, if he understands that it's something that really concerns him or her, rather than if it's let's say, an abstract learning. And in this respect, precisely, I wanted to come to this issue of cooperatives within the schools. So cooperatives can be established within the schools. And this is something which has developed in some countries more than in others. In particular, you have in Malta, in France, or in Argentina, where you have, in particular in Argentina, you have hundreds of cooperatives in the schools. So the youngsters, even at 6 years old, they start to learn what is a cooperative by being a cooperative member themselves. So they have to elect a president, and they also have small but some economic activities, like buying paper together, buying ball pens, whatever, you name it, but they have to deal with concrete things. And then they understand what it is about, and they will never forget. There's no way a child that has gone through this kind of experience will ever forget having been a member of a cooperative at school. So this is also something that has to be thought about very, very strongly. And there will be more clients, let's say, for youth cooperatives if in the first place they have been trained in like that. But also because, I mean, there have been a number of let's say, of pedagogists, not only Paulo Freire, but also Freinet in France, Montessori in Italy, and so on, who have been working on this issue of participative pedagogy, which very much fits the cooperative spirit. So, and this is something we also have to work about, and which the cooperative movement has not worked very much on, is how can we, let's say, better, combine these two forces, let's say, this kind of participative pedagogy and the one of the development of cooperatives. Yeah, that I said, and there was, then I'll go backward because, yeah. So I just wanted to say that inside the ICA and the ICA system, the issue of youth has also been, it has been mainstreamed. If we had met about 15 years ago, there was nominally a youth network in the ICA, but it was very nominal. It was like, more like lip service, and you had the youth that would, let's say, well, I'm the youth that represents the youth in the cooperative movement. There has been a big leap forward in this respect, also because in the different countries we have seen the federations working on the youth issue and having some youth delegates, and therefore it has also become possible that at an international level, because if nothing happens at the national level, how do you want? It's very difficult to have it at an international level. So the fact that many members started in elaborating the issue of youth, youth cooperatives and youth in cooperatives, has made it possible also to promote it at the international level within the ICA system. You have heard about what CICOPA did, for example. Cooperatives Europe, the part of the ICA for Europe, has recently established its own cooperative youth network. And the ICA Youth Network has reinforced itself. So we have seen very much, let's say, that they have met more than before, that they have also come up with proposals, written down those proposals, explained those proposals. So we have seen the youth starting, being more explicit about what they wanted, the vision of the world, their own perception of cooperatives. This has helped us a lot, because if the youth tell us nothing, we cannot also all the time speak in the name of the youth. You need the youth to speak about themselves and say what they need, what they think should be developed. So a lot of what I said earlier is not of my own thinking. It's things that I've heard also the youth of our own, let's say, ICA system telling me. And so there is, as I said, there is a representative on the ICA board, but also, I mean, on the ICA board, that I speak about my own experience now, I mean, there is, at every board meeting, there is a report from the youth network. So the youth will take the floor and explain things, a number of things, and projects that they have, and things that they want to, projects that they want to develop, and then it is debated within the board. And this, as I said, did not happen in the same way a few years ago. And next year, precisely within the framework of this new dynamic of the youth, this youth network in the ICA, for the first time, there will be a big meeting of the youth in Thailand. It's a kind of summer university that will be about 4 or 5 days. And so we are presently preparing it. Yeah? And so this is important because it will gather not only people who have experience, so youth who know, who are in cooperatives, who have established their own cooperative, but also some of the youth movements, the delegates from the youth movements that are interested about cooperatives, and also young researchers. Because also we have a group of young scholars inside the Committee on Cooperative Research of the ICA. You can see them here meeting. I was recently in a meeting of the Committee on Cooperative Research, the European part. They met in Holland in July, and there was one specific day where the youth scholar met. And so it's also important that these youth scholars are integrated because they are interested, they study the issue of cooperatives, and of course they are particularly, let's say, sensitive to the issue of the youth in cooperatives because they are young themselves. And so these are new elements that are emerging little by little, and which now we have to try to reinforce at the international level. And last but not least, yes. The last thing I wanted to emphasize is the issue of statistics, because in fact that was mentioned by Diana. At the beginning of this campaign, there was the ambition to try to have an idea of what was the reality of the youth in cooperatives in the world. The reality is that we don't know, so it's also easy to speak and say, well, it's like this, or it's like that, or that there are many youth in cooperatives, or there are not many youth in cooperatives. Everybody can say what they want because we don't know. So it's very easy to elaborate out of one's own imagination and to confound one's own ideas with the reality. So very few countries, so very few members of the ICA work on, have good statistics to begin with, so it's also something that has to be developed, but also very few have statistics about the youth, about the ages. And so this is something that we are trying to start convincing members also to have better statistics on ages, so that we can at some point know what is the reality. Are there many youth? Is there, and then try to see if there is a progression. Are we having more youth in cooperatives than 5 years ago, than 10 years ago? And when we ask the members, the federation, they say, we don't know. We think there are more, but we don't have any figures. So it's very difficult to talk about this phenomenon without having any concrete data, not even estimates. So I'm not saying that we should have precise statistics, but at least some kind of estimate. Even that we don't have. So we are in complete mist. We don't know. Maybe Mondragon, I don't know, Mondragon, do you know how many youth you have? Do you have statistics about the youth in Mondragon, for example? Sorry? A few. Okay. But I mean, can you imagine? That's not too difficult. Among about 100 cooperatives, they can easily obtain and figure out these. Also, the French worker cooperatives, they're about 3,000, and they manage to have these kind of figures. So when you put the emphasis on statistics and you are not too many, that's okay. But when you have, like in Italy, you have tens of thousands of members in a federation, that becomes a bit more difficult. So, and it's costly also to do. I mean, it costs money to make proper statistics. So you need to have also the financial means. So all that is not easy, and it will not come up immediately. But this is something that, and also we have to involve the states also, and in the statistical offices in the various countries to work also on the issue of age in cooperative. But this is long-term work.
Veseli me, da sem lahko na tej konferenci slišal pravzaprav osupljive pozitivne podatke o številčni moči in o, bom rekel, zadružni povezanosti v Evropi. To me veseli. Rad pa bi povedal, da me na tej konferenci o zadružništvu je vključeno tudi vaše govorjenje oziroma vaše razmišljanje, da mi nekako manjka fokusiranje na en bistven problem, ki ga jaz vidim tako. Vi sami ste rekli, da je svetovna povezanost zadružništva pravzaprav vprašaj, ki je nerešen. To ste vi sami rekli, ne? Se pravi, povezovanje na mednarodnem nivoju zadružništva nekako ni neke vizije oziroma ni neke gotovosti, ni nekega, bom rekel, oprijemljivosti ni, če me razumete, če ste me prav prevedli. To, kar se danes tu dogaja, to je mednarodno povezovanje, zadružništvu, bom rekel, privrženih ljudi. To je mednarodno povezovanje. Ampak vi sami ste rekli, da en koncept povezovanja tu ga ni še, da je nedoločen. Nasproti te nedoločenosti na področju zadružništva imamo pa eno drugo zelo določeno povezanost. In to je povezanost podjetniškega sistema, ki nima zveze z zadružništvom, ki ima zvezo s finančnim kapitalom. Ta povezanost pa je v zadnjih 20 letih, v 30 letih, vi ste opazili to s pripombo, da se je spremenil učni sistem, spremenili so se generacije mladih ljudi, ki jih jaz kot mladinski delavec spremljam 25 let. Spremenili so se mladi in spremenili so se odrasli. In ta sila, ki ima moč povezovati se v povezanost, ki ima zvezo z pretokom kapitala, je tako močna in tako jasno globalna, da se mi zdi, da se mi pogovarjamo oziroma da mi razpravljamo nekako v Noetovi barki zadružništva, če sem prav to povedal, pa če me boste prav prevedli. Upam, da sem bil razumljiv. To je ena pripomba in druga pripomba pa je, ko ste rekli, mladi so pomembni. Mladi imajo v organizaciji en glas od 30-ih, ne? In tu vidite, tega prej ni bilo, zdaj pa je in se bo še razvijalo. Jaz mislim, da je glavni problem pravzaprav osredotočenje na mlade z, ne bom rekel izobraževanjem, ampak z protiizobraževanjem, z nasprotnim izobraževanjem, z nasprotnim informiranjem. Se pravi, da tu gre za en spopad izobraževalnega sistema, ki ga vzpostavlja ena moč, v spopadu z izobraževalnim sistemom, ki ga tukaj gojimo in se o njem potrpežljivo pogovarjamo, pika. Hvala za pozornost in moč, da sem se lahko.
Yeah, a counter comment on the comment. There is no question that, let's say, there are forces in the world that are much more important than us and that influence public policies. And that these forces cooperate among themselves very well. So sometimes they even cooperate better than ourselves. And so it is logical, and we don't have, I mean, the cooperative system has very little means at our disposal. I mean, we are just a small NGO. I have only 10 people working in my organization. I mean, we are just a very small organization. Huh? And if you count all the sectoral and the regional organization, you reach maybe 50 people at most. You know, so the international cooperative movement is 50 people, nothing more. So we do whatever we can. Yeah, there's a lot of issues like the youth issues. There are 10 other important issues like that. We do whatever we can. And first of all, if we did not exist, it would be much worse, of course. So at least we're trying to put the issues on the table. And I think it is important that I understand what you say. We should do counter-education, but then we could say what we are doing is counter-entrepreneurship, and we are doing counter this and counter that. Attention! I think that if we have to be mainstream. I mean, we have to understand. We have to be proud of what we are. We are not counter. I mean, we are not against. We are not. Let's say when you say the alternative to what? No, we are a big part of the citizenship in the cooperative movement. So this is what we are. That's it. We are ourselves. We are not something against something else. But we have to, of course, develop the instruments of our own entrepreneurship, of our own education, because, of course, since we are a specific system, we need specific instruments in entrepreneurship, in education, and so on.